Welcome to Friday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live here on Giants.com as well as the mobile app. It is presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. He's Paul Dottino. I'm Lance Medow with you for the next 60 minutes. Multiple ways to interact with us here on the program. You give us a ring at 201-939-4513. You can also interact with the two of us on Twitter. I am at Lance Medow, one word, last name, M-E-D-O-W. He is at Giants WFAN. You could use hashtag Giants Chat as well. And as a reminder, you can find the archive of this show and our entire podcast network on the Giants mobile app, podcast platforms everywhere, and at Giants.com/podcast. So we're gearing up for the Giants and the Jets. MetLife Stadium. Giants will be the home team this Sunday. Brian Daboll spoke to the media earlier today, so let's start there. No surprise, Daniel Jones has officially been ruled out, as well as running back Gary Brightwell. That's why they made a number of moves to bring in additional running backs, because Eric Gray was also put on IR earlier this week. So Tyrod Taylor is going to make his third consecutive start, and he has been taking the first-team reps for the last few weeks, so this is not necessarily a baptism by fire situation, but we know Taylor, at least the positive is, Paul, he's been able to build some rhythm with the offensive personnel. We saw some of the deep shots down the field with Jalen Hyatt. You don't want to see your starting quarterback hurt, but I think the silver lining here is, okay, now Tyrod Taylor walking into his third straight game, you know, this is not the feel-it-out process anymore. He's had enough reps. You could argue maybe the offensive line is still being moved around, okay?
Yes.
I'm not disputing that. No,
and
but
we don't know who the five starting guys
we
will
still
be
don't
this
know
week.
because there's still a question mark about John Michael Schmitz and Andrew Thomas and Evan Neal. But the point is, at least in terms of his targets, we're at the point of the season where I think there's been enough chemistry established between both parties.
We've seen him make some plays to Robinson, Hyatt, Waller. He's spread the ball around pretty well. Waller seems to have really picked up his numbers
lately. Nice rapport with him, yeah.
But, look, you said all along that you were a proponent of Tyrod Taylor being the backup 2 years ago, or last year, I should say. You knew that he could win games in this league. We all saw that on his resume. But until he actually gets out on the field in this situation, you don't really know, okay, he's in his, 33, 34 years old, and he has had a lot of injuries. And even though, you know, he's got mobility and he's got a good arm and he's got experience, you can't be 100% sure that he can still win games for you if thrust into an emergency situation. Well, now we know he can win games for you because he had them in the Buffalo game, and he flat out helped beat Washington. So there's no longer a question or a doubt as to, is Tyrod Taylor still have enough left to be a guy who can win you some games in the short term? We now know that. He's proven it.
Sure.
And I think that's really the important thing that you're getting at as he plays his third straight game now going into Sunday's matchup against the Jets. The Giants know that, hey, Tyrod Taylor is not going to be an impediment to them winning this game. I said to John the other day, Saquon Barkley needs to have a big game. That, to me, is the crux of the Giants winning. You talk about the Bill Parcells paths to victory. Their path to victory is get Saquon Barkley going. And, by the way, important in the passing game because the Jets do not do well defending running backs in the passing game. Get Barkley going and make sure that they take advantage of the turnovers the Jets are going to give them and make sure that they don't give up any big creases so that Breece Hall can bust out on a 25-yard run once a quarter because he's capable of doing that.
And he's a good receiver, too, based on what he did last week as well.
Those are the keys to the path to victory for the Giants. The X factor for me is special teams.
Yep, I agree.
Don't lose hidden yardage in special teams because Gibson can hurt you.
Sure.
He is really, really good. And the Giants special teams, well, we know their return game has really been nil, for the season. That's it. And none of those keys involve Tyrod Taylor. None of them. Because he's not a variable for me. Tyrod Taylor, we know we can plug him in. He's a standard NFL quarterback who can win you a game and is not going to hurt you.
Well, because he makes great decisions. That's why we're not sitting here wondering, is he going to try to put his team in a precarious spot because he's going to press the envelope? That's not Tyrod. I mean, that's not his MO.
No.
So I'm with you. I would put special teams atop the list. I wouldn't be surprised, Paul, when
That's
it's all
the X
said and
factor
done.
for me.
I would not be surprised if that facet is what decides Sunday's game, meaning one of the two teams gets a big return, one of the two teams maybe gets a takeaway on special teams, flips the field effectively with respect to maybe you pin back your opponent deep into the back of their own end zone, then you get a block punt or something like that. The more and more I think about this game, the more and more all roads lead to special teams. Because I think most people on the surface, you're looking at two offenses that are averaging under 20 points per game. The Jets are in more of the 19-point ballpark. The Giants are in the 12-point territory. Neither one of these teams has lit up the scoreboard. Both teams have been playing really good defensively, speaking. The Jets a little bit more consistently, of course, than the Giants, who have come along in the last two. So, I mean, field positioning is what it all comes back to, right? If this is going to be a grinded-out, low-scoring affair, then the old cliche about it's a game of inches comes alive and gets brought to the forefront. So the more and more, once again, I break down this game, the more and more I go back to special teams. And I think right now the Jets probably in better shape with that facet, as you pointed out, because they have a little bit more chemistry. The Giants have had a multitude of players that have been involved in the return game. We've seen some penalties come back to haunt them, right? Especially if you go back to the Seahawks game. But if they can master that area and you don't give gifts to the Jets, meaning you don't give Paul Zach Wilson a very short field. This is not the type of game you want to do that where Greg Zuerlein, by the way, is having an excellent season.
I know.
So that's another thing that you have to take into consideration. If you don't lay out the red carpet treatment for the kicker and the quarterback and you make them have to go 80 to 90 yards, then all of a sudden I think the offense is what really can do the trick here.
It's funny because I told John the other day, and I'll say it again here, maybe you folks heard the show, maybe you didn't. It's not going to take more than 20 points to win this game, Lance. It's not.
I'd be very surprised if it takes more than that. Yeah.
Okay? And, twice in the last 5 times the Giants and Jets have met in the regular season, they've gone to overtime. I'm not going to be surprised if they go to overtime again on Sunday. I'm sorry. I will not be. Remember, that was the first overtime regular season game in Giants history, in NFL history at the Yale Bowl, the Joe Namath game, we all know. That goes back to 74. So, in 3 times in the series, this game has gone into an extra session. I absolutely think it's realistic we could see an overtime game on Sunday. I really believe that. I don't feel that very often. I feel it could be Sunday.
Well, the Giants, they've played a few close games the last few weeks. The Jets pretty much have played
How about all last
a lot
year?
of close games.
Even all last year, the Giants played close games.
Sure,
This is what this team does.
100%. Yeah, but I mean, I think the substance of the evidence this season is far more important to raise than what went on last season, given it's a different team and different dynamics. But neither of these teams has run away with things, I think is your point. So why would this game be any different, especially if both offenses have yet to light up the scoreboard? I think both teams are leaning heavily on their defense, and they're hoping that maybe special teams once again makes a difference here or there. Let's get a little bit more into the matchup. We talked about the Giants. At least we know those two players who have been ruled out. The Jets, I know Robert Saleh spoke earlier today and indicated that their top 2 corners, Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed, have now cleared concussion protocol. I don't think that's a surprise. I mean, they were trending in the right direction, especially since they missed the game 2 weeks ago against the Eagles prior to the bye. But it seems to be an all-hands-on-deck situation for at least the Jets' defense for the most part. I know Joe Tippmann, one of their offensive linemen at right guard, will not be available. So they, much like the Giants, have moved a lot of personnel around, and they lost Elijah Vera-Tucker earlier this season to a season-ending injury. Mekhi Becton is held up. Dwayne Brown is not going to be activated off injured reserve. There was some talk about that maybe they would bring him back, and Robert Saleh ruled that out earlier this week. And if you don't want to talk about special teams being the X factor, then I think the other area you go to, Paul, is playing the trenches. And I'm talking about flip-flop, vice versa. Jets offensive line against the Giants defensive front, and then the opposite end of the spectrum. That's going to also tell a lot about field positioning on the offensive side of the ball. Now, the interesting thing about the Jets is the Jets are not a blitzing team. Their philosophy is we've got confidence in our front guys. They're going to win the one-on-one battles. We like our secondary, and let's go mano-a-mano and let the best man win. So, unlike previous opponents, Paul, the Giants are not going to have all of these tricks that the Jets are going to showcase them.
No, I wouldn't totally agree with that. The Jets are a heavy stunting team.
Well, but what I'm saying
when you
is
say
that,
mano-a-mano, best man wins, that's basically a straight-at-you defense.
Well, but I think there's a lot to be seen with respect to the Jets defense
run
on
a
that front.
ton of – they're top 5 in league in
but
stunts.
see, to me, that's not a trick. I don't look at that as a big dig deep into your
– it's a spice, if not a trick.
Okay,
it's a spice.
But it's not – I mean, a lot of teams run that, I guess is my point. They're not bringing something out of the woodworks.
They run as much as almost any of the top teams to do it.
But they're not bringing the house. Which is
they're not an overly heavy blitz
and that
team.
Is my main point.
That's true. Yeah. But they do run stunts, and we all know that stunts have given the Giants' offensive line trouble for years.
100%. And they have to account for that. But they don't have to account for being under siege is where I'm getting at.
I hope not.
Okay, well if they're gonna be under siege, though, Paul, the point is that's going to be because the guys just can't handle the front four.
Right.
Or if they bring a fifth guy. Because I think that, once again, this Jets defense has confidence, especially based on, by the way, the linebacker play, I think should be raised more so than the guys up front. I mean, Quincy Williams is having a heck of a season.
Oh, start with C.J. Mosley.
But I would say Quincy's having a better statistical season than C.J. Mosley.
I understand.
So those two guys are the ones that can really wreak havoc for the Giants, because if they're not coming towards the quarterback and they're staying back, or they're at least testing the waters, we've seen Quincy Williams has gotten his hands on a lot of footballs to make some opportunistic plays. And I mean, Mosley, I've watched my fair share of Jets games where he wants a few catches back that he dropped because he was in the area. So those two guys are two players in particular that Tyrod, I think, needs to keep very close tabs on.
Even more so, Saquon Barkley. I talked to Barkley the other day specifically about their rush defense, and it was Mosley and Williams that he made sure to talk about. Now, I know it doesn't matter really, because the players back in 2019 when these teams last met are not really here anymore. There's been a lot of turnover.
Yeah, tremendous turnover.
But the last time they played, the Jets held the Giants to 23 rushing yards in the game. Barkley had his lowest output since he's come to the Giants. 13 carries for 1 yard. Think about that for a second, okay? That's less than an inch per carry.
Yeah, that's not good.
That boggles the mind. Less than an inch per carry. So,
but when you have a few negative runs, that does the trick, essentially.
All right. So my point is this. Saquon Barkley, who's had 2 good weeks in a row now since he's come back into the lineup off the sprained ankle, I got to feel he's going to be like a house of fire. Now, they're going to load up for him. Those backers are going to be sniffing and smelling blood. But Barkley's going to be playing like a house of dynamite too. And that's why, for me, he's the key to a Giants victory. I think he was the key to the game last weekend. If Barkley doesn't provide what he provided in terms of some good key hard runs, and of course the flat pass that went for the decisive touchdown, if he's not doing that, now the Washington offense can cheat like everybody else could when Barkley wasn't in the lineup. Barkley's very presence, in addition to his production, made life for Tyrod Taylor so much easier. It's not even funny. Barkley must be the linchpin to lead the Giants to victory this week. Just like the Jets feel Breece Hall is going to be the linchpin for them.
Sure. And really, it's scrimmage yards, I would argue. It's not just rushing yards for both.
Correct.
Both running backs.
Correct.
It's what they do also out of the backfield, because to your point, Saquon, he created all of that against Washington to get the 32-yard touchdown. And we've seen Breece Hall home run. He finds a hole, gets a big run, but also if you throw it to him out in the flat and he gets blockers and you miss tackles, that could be troublesome for you too.
He's a crease guy.
Yeah.
He takes advantage of creases.
Let's put it this way. At this stage of the season, the Jets are running their offense through Breece Hall, and the Giants are leaning heavily on Saquon Barkley.
Yeah.
So that's the similarity from that standpoint. The other thing that I think elevates what you were talking about with respect to why Saquon is going to be so key is because the Jets have the luxury, and most teams don't, where they feel really good about both of their perimeter corners, where they don't need to give them extra assistance, Paul. Meaning they feel good. Sauce, you take your guy. DJ, you take your guy.
So the safeties cheat up a little bit.
Correct. So if you are that confident in both of your corners, you'll be okay with leaving them on islands, and now you can allow the linebackers and the safeties to assist in terms of helping the run getting after the quarterback.
And by the way, that's also why you can't be slamming Barkley directly up the middle into that wall of bodies 15 times a game, okay? You've got to get Saquon out to the edge.
In space.
You have to.
Yeah.
Because where do you think those safeties are going to run fit? They're going to run fit between the tackles most of the time. Sometimes you get a safety coming around the edge.
Unless there's a guy mimicking, I didn't mean to cut you, shadowing Barkley a little bit, depending on what the Jets' philosophy is.
I hope they do that.
Could they do something like that?
Oh, please. Please.
Okay.
Go ahead. Shadow Barkley, Jets. Great idea. Waller will kill you. In fact, Darren Waller had a 200-yard receiving game against the Jets a few years ago when he was with the Raiders. Go right ahead. Shadow Barkley. Do that. Great. Spy him.
I'm just throwing that out there as perhaps an option.
Waller would destroy them. Destroy them with the open space that the shadow would leave by covering Barkley.
Well, once again, I'm just throwing that out there as an option. You clearly are not the Jets' defensive coordinator, so you would completely throw that out of the window.
Go ahead. Let's help the Jets. Go ahead.
No,
you got more ideas for them? Do
once
it.
again, I'm just trying to think about what Jeff Ulbrich, the defensive coordinator, Robert Saleh, when they look at the Giants, okay, now that Barkley's back, right? How many times we had conversations, Paul, when Barkley wasn't on the field? Okay, who are you focusing on if you're playing the Giants?
Waller.
Okay, so now you have a few options to toy with. Well, what do they look at as a bigger killer to them? Do they look at it as Barkley getting hot, or do they look at it as Darren Waller? Now, I think after the Washington game and what Waller was able to do, and he found the seam.
He caught some passes against Buffalo, too, now.
Sure, he did. Yeah. You say to yourself, okay, hey, this is somebody we need to watch out for. But you also look at what Barkley did when Taylor dumped it off to him in the flat. And if guys are out of position, Barkley can win his one-on-one battle. So I think both guys give you some food for thought with respect to who you're more concerned with. I would think, though, in a game like this, at least if I'm the Jets, and I'm just giving my own personal opinion, I'd be more concerned about Saquon than Darren Waller in terms of wrecking a game because of how low scoring we're anticipating this, how it could be a dirty game in the trenches. If I'm the Jets, I'd be more consumed with Saquon going off than taking my chances with Darren Waller.
I agree. I've been saying for all week, Barkley is the key to the game. But if they want to overplay and try to limit him, thank goodness the Giants have the ability now to adjust. And we know that Tyrod Taylor's not going to panic throwing the ball, to your point before. He had the brain lock at the end of the game against Buffalo, at the end of halftime against Buffalo. But he doesn't panic throwing the ball into harm's way.
Yeah.
That we know, too. Now, I will also add one other item here. And for all you Giants and Jets fans out there who remember the preseason game earlier this year, right out of the box, Hyatt against Sauce Gardner. Hyatt beats him by at least 2 or 3 yards. Ball's underthrown. Gardner breaks it up, and he's having a celebration. But the truth of the matter is his butt was burned. He was burned. Hyatt went right by him like the Roadrunner. Beep, beep. And, the ball wasn't there. You're going to see that play again on Sunday. I'm telling you, it's going to come back. We'll see.
And this time, I think both parties are a little bit better prepared.
I think they are, and we're going to see who wins it.
Well, and that's fine. And, hey, the Jets are more than comfortable, like I said, leaving Sauce Gardner out there.
I know. And
Hyatt's
Hyatt's very comfortable running against
100%.
him.
So I think both teams are saying to themselves, all right, line the guys up and let's see who wins.
Yep.
And let the best man prevail.
One final thought before we get to our calls. I know we got a lot of folks on the line. One final thought is this. The Giants need to mix up their pass-run combination within individual series. Again, we've been talking about this now for a few weeks. In fact, I think I've been talking about it all year. Part of the reason the Giants are having trouble on third down, and they are at, let's see here, they're at 38% on the year, which is 21st in the league. Part of the reason is they've got too many third and longs, like you usually talk about all the time.
Yep.
You can't put yourself in those spots. So if you're going to take some shots in the passing game, take it on first or second down. Don't put yourself into the corner of the room and tell the Jets, you got us where you want us. It's 3rd and long. We've basically cut off our own knees, and we're allowing you to sick our quarterback. Don't do that. If you're going to take a deep shot to Hyatt or Slayton or even Waller down the seam. Waller's got 5 receptions of 20 yards or more this year, which is second among tight ends in the league. He has been getting downfield. So if you're going to do that, do it on 1st or 2nd down so you don't play into the Jets' hands on 3rd down.
Well, to your point, as you know, I do chart the 3rd down scenarios. The Giants in the last 2 weeks, let's look at the recent contest. They have faced a total of 35 3rd downs. Of those 35 3rd downs, Paul, just to give you an idea, 14 of them have been for 8 yards or more. So, that's
it's too many.
Nice chunk.
It's too many.
Yeah. And I classify 8 yards or more is lengthy to me. I think anything less than that is manageable, at least through my lens.
A lot of your best teams in the league, and I think the Giants, I know the line is shuffled and they've got their own issues with the line, but the weaponry now, with Barkley back, the weaponry that you can throw out on the field against the defense is more than respectable. So the better offenses in the league very often will have fewer 3rd down opportunities because they will convert 1st downs on either 1st or 2nd down. And then if they do face 3rd downs, usually they're shorter. And that's why they have a higher 3rd down conversion rate. I want to read you one other number. The Jets this year, they're giving up over 46% 3rd down conversions. That's 30th in the league. Okay? So they're having a lot of trouble on 3rd down. But what you don't want to do is give them a chance to pass rush like crazy on 3rd down, because those few 3rd down opportunities that they've been able to stop people on could be key 3rd and longs that force you into a bad situation. That could be an interception. It could be forcing you to punt and giving them a short field. No, you don't want to do that. The paths to victory to beating this Jets team are numerous. They are numerous. Just make sure you execute and follow those paths.
You also want to be able to loosen up maybe the defense so that when they get to 3rd down, they got to think about what you're going to do. And that goes back to the 3rd down and distance. Because if you're facing 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, the Jets know you have to throw the football. You're not going to be running the ball. If you face a 3rd and 3, well, maybe you give them once again something to think about, and therefore they don't want to take as many chances. So it changes the dynamics immensely in terms of what the Jets' defensive thinking is. And that's why I go back to playing the trenches as a complementary item to special teams in terms of dictating how this game is going to play out, because we're expecting, I think we're both on the same page, a relatively low-scoring affair. And that's why all these little nuances of the game are going to ultimately add up. A few reminders before we open up the phone lines. You could join us Sunday, November 5th at Blue Ale House in Riverdale, New Jersey to watch the Giants take on Las Vegas. You can enjoy Modelo drink specials, meet a Giants legend, enter a raffle to win game tickets and more. Visit Giants.com/Bar Network to learn more.
Final thought.
Yes.
The Jets this year have given up 210 rushing yards to quarterbacks, second most of any defense in the league. Would I love to have Daniel Jones back there? Sure I would. But Tyrod Taylor can run too. Just a thought.
I just don't know how much volume, though, you would see him take off.
I'm not saying it's going to be volume, but he does have elusiveness in the pocket.
Yep.
And he can scramble.
And you always have to have that in your back pocket. And Tyrod hasn't hesitated. You see when a play breaks down, he'll run towards the sideline.
He's willing to go.
Yeah, even if he picks up 4 to 5 yards. I just don't see it being a high-volume game like that.
Doesn't have to
You know,
be.
we're going to see him get into the Lamar Jackson-esque territory of running. But could he do it 3 to 4 times over the course of the game? Sure.
That'll be fine as long as all 3 or 4 times convert 3rd down opportunities.
Well, when you have no option and that's the only one, sure. But Tyrod just, once again, it goes back to his decision-making. He's the type of guy, it seems to me, at the last resort, he'll run. But he's going to take his options down the field before he even goes down that road.
Maybe this week, and I'm not one who likes to see the quarterback run unnecessarily, but maybe this week that can also be part of the plan.
Giants Huddle Podcast, you can check that out, giants.com/podcasts, as well as your favorite podcast platforms. In terms of tickets, they are out. Single game tickets are on sale now. Don't miss the Giants at MetLife Stadium this season. Visit giants.com/tickets to secure your seat. And the Giants official connected TV streaming app. It's Giants TV. It brings you original video content and game highlights on demand and direct to Big Blue fans. Giants TV, it's free. It's on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, as well as the Giants mobile app. All right, let's open up the phone lines as we move forward here on BBKL. We check in with Ron in New Jersey, joining us here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. What's happening, Ron? What do you got for us?
Hey guys, good to talk to you. So I'll be at the game Sunday. Hopefully the weather will hold up for us. But I have a question for both of you. But Paul, you're going to like this one, and I could take it off the air. But quick preface, I'm having a couple of cocktails last night with friends who are Giant fans. We're discussing the games. These guys are not smart enough to listen to this podcast. And a question comes up, and one of the guys says to me, who's going to give us a headache on the Jets? Which players on offense and defense? Paul, I had to laugh and say, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to call Paul tomorrow and get his opinion because nobody knows headache players better.
Well, you know, it's pretty obvious when you're looking at the Jets offense. It's Breece Hall and it's Wilson, Garrett Wilson. Here's what you see when you look at the cut-ups of the Jets passing game this year. And I'm sure you might have some numbers to help me out and back me up on this, Lance. Zach Wilson is a dramatically different, not just a little bit different, but a dramatically different quarterback when you pressure him. The Jets have given up 9 sacks over the last 2 games, okay, which is a ton, by the way. Their offensive line's been more sieve-like than the Giants have in the last 2 weeks. Now, what you notice is that he is basically laser-focused on Garrett Wilson whenever he gets pressured.
Yeah, he's the highly targeted guy.
It's not just that he's the go-to guy or the favorite guy. No. He is the guy, capital letters, the guy when Wilson starts to get itchy. The other thing that you notice about Zach Wilson is that in those spots, he usually throws an errant pass. So what you know is if you're a defensive back, if you're, let's say, Tay Banks, what you know is that if Zach Wilson is getting a lot of pressure and he's taking the hits and it's starting to eat at him, what you know is if you're covering Garrett Wilson, not only is the ball probably coming your way, but you also know it's going to be an errant throw because that's what Zach Wilson has shown throughout the course of the season. He will look to Garrett Wilson in those spots and he will usually make an errant throw. His best numbers...
Maybe we should grab one of them.
That's what I'm trying to tell you. You've got to be very much aware of this because there will be opportunities for interceptions. What you don't want... Yeah, well, what you don't want, though, when Zach Wilson and Garrett Wilson have hooked up, it's almost invariably because it was off of a clean pocket and a clean route where it was like a pitch and catch situation. It was just too easy. Lance and Pearson could play catch under those situations. Okay? You want to avoid that. You don't want a Wilson to Wilson pitch and catch situation because that will kill you.
Sure, well, because they like to get him out in open space because, I mean, Garrett Wilson has speed and some of his biggest catches this season. I mean, he had one against the Cowboys where they got him on a slant and then he took it to the house. So it's not as if they're looking for him with the home run. They just want him to get some leverage off the line of scrimmage, get him out in open space, have the two of them hook up, and then you got to make sure you bring him down. So, I mean, I would agree with those two. I would add also Xavier Gipson. I think could be a headache player for the Giants because, A, they're involving him a little bit more on offense, and B, we know what he could do on special teams.
That's for sure. Special teams is a big deal.
Against the Buffalo Bills. And then on defense, Quincy Williams is having a heck of a season at linebacker. I know, Paul, you're high on C.J. Mosley, and I'm not denying that, but Quincy Williams, you see him on film, you see him statistically speaking. I mean, he's a guy, middle of the field, that has been wreaking havoc. He's been stripping away the football. So that's one guy. And then Quinnen Williams, he's not having a high volume of sacks thus far, but he's getting a lot of pressures, especially amongst defensive tackles. And, you know, the old story with the Jets is if they could collapse the pocket, they believe that the guys on the edge are going to be able to get home because the Jets, they have a lot of depth up front. And if you look at the snap count, they're rotating these guys in and out to keep them fresh, especially in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, Yeah,
Barkley's got to run away from Williams, don't you think?
Well, sure. That's why we were talking about running Saquon off the edge. We were talking about that earlier. I mean, yeah, you don't want to run into a brick wall, but I'm talking more about Quinnen Williams in the pass rush department, meaning if you let him penetrate, now all of a sudden, if Tyrod doesn't have an escape route, the other guys can now all of a sudden box him in. So he may not be getting the sacks, but don't overlook what he's doing for the other players on the defensive front.
So you've covered the defensive headache players well, but I will say this. The older of the Williams brothers, Quincy, is the linebacker. You want to run at him. As they tell you with all mobile linebackers who defend the run well, and Quincy Williams, I want to say he's fourth in the NFL right now in tackles against the run. All right, he's got 27. By the way, you know who's number one? Bobby Okereke of the Giants has 31 tackles against the run. He's been playing like a beast, having a great month. Great month. But Quincy Williams is a guy you want to run at him. Those are the types of backers you always want to get a hat on, and you want to pound them and pound them and pound them and get a blocker right in his face, right in his chest, and hit him. That's the best way to attack this run game, especially when he's out there on the edge. Okay? Get somebody out in front. This is where I really miss. I don't know how old you are, caller, but this is where I miss a Maurice Carthon or a Madison Hedgecock. Is that all right? Maybe that's a little younger for you.
How's this one for you? You mentioned the Giant game at Yale Bowl.
Yeah,
that was the second Giant game I ever went to.
You remember how the officials screwed up Pete Gogolak's field goal?
I don't remember that.
Okay,
no,
Gogolak hit a field goal that won the game for the Giants. The official said it was wide. He kicked it over the upright. It was too high, and he kicked it over the upright, and then the Jets came down and wound up winning the game in overtime. But enough of history. The point is, that's what you want to do in terms of Spring and Barkley. Make sure you have an escort for him that's going to take on Williams to the outside, and if it's going to be inside, you better have an escort against Mosley.
And Ron, appreciate the phone call. Thanks for giving us a ring here. Let's head back to the lines. We got Don in Texas joining us. What's happening, Don? What do you got for us?
Hi, Lance. Hi, P-Dot. I was really happy to get you two on today because a lot of the content, I believe you guys can satisfy my curiosity a little bit here. So give me a few minutes here.
Okay.
Guys.
Okay. Well, we're all ears.
All right. Thank you. So there was a couple topics on yesterday's show between John and Jonathan Casillas that I kind of wanted to piggyback on today with the topics. I know you didn't listen to it, but I just wanted to kind of brush on it. First, I think we could all agree this is going to be a defensive battle game this Sunday. It's going to be low-scoring, 13-9, 16-13 type game. I believe that Tyrod Taylor gives us a better chance than Daniel Jones for this game to win. And my reasoning for that is it's going to be the turnover battle. Daniel Jones is more likely to turn the ball over against his team than Tyrod is. And since Zach Wilson is also a turnover-prone person, this is why I believe Tyrod is a better fit for this game. The second thing I wanted to bring up, I'll take your opinion on that very shortly, but the second thing that Jonathan talked about yesterday was tempo of the game, speeding up the offense, keeping the defense a little bit predictable, but not doing it all game.
Mm-hmm.
P-Dot, you being down at the sidelines, I wanted to pick your brain on this, and maybe I'm seeing things, and this is really meant for you guys as well as the other Giants fans to pay attention to this. When Daniel Jones is out there, okay, and he's about to snap the ball or pre-snap and all that other good stuff before the ball gets snapped, it's as if the defense is teeing up as if they know the count. Versus watching Tyrod, it's not as predictable. This was something Eli did very well throughout his years. He did that very well.
The hard count is an art that you've got to learn, but it also takes a tremendous amount of fluidity between you and the offensive line.
Yeah.
That's something that has to develop, and with the juggling line that they've had, it's pretty hard to make that happen. But I agree with you. There have been too many times this year, and it really goes for the whole season, where the defensive linemen, specifically the pass rushers, have gotten off better at the snap than the Giants' O-line.
Thank you. I just thought I was seeing things there.
No, you're not seeing things at all.
Do you think that will improve as the line becomes more consistent with a 5 that is consistently playing?
We got to get 5 consistently playing first.
Yeah. Well, because I mean, you could also put your offensive line in a position where they get penalized for a false start.
No
too,
doubt.
depending on the hard count. So I think you got to walk a very fine line with respect to that. I mean, I don't think it helps the quarterback's cause when sometimes he goes into a Sunday and is not necessarily sure which 5 guys are going to line up until kickoff. So that has probably been a contributing factor, though Tyrod also has a little bit more experience maybe dealing with change than Daniel Jones does because of all the years he's been in the NFL. But, I mean, the bottom line is no matter whether you're a veteran or a guy that's been in the league for 3 or 4 years, you still need that time with that offensive line because the offensive line needs to understand your cadence. Remember when Justin Pugh got into the Buffalo game and he got those penalties, the false starts? He said the cadence threw him off. He wasn't used to the quarterback that he was working with.
He also had been lining up at guard for so many years. He said even hearing the cadence out at tackle was a problem.
Well, and that's why I'm going back to if little things like that bother an offensive lineman and you want to talk about a hard count that try to get the defensive lineman and the offensive lineman on the same page, I mean, you're really asking for trouble, I would say.
To your first point, though, no, Daniel Jones is the franchise quarterback here, and he's got he's just got more all-around talent than Tyrod Taylor does, and that's no disrespect to Tyrod. So, no, I would disagree with you. I think they're better off if Jones was healthy and playing. You also must take into account what I said earlier. Jones is clearly a much more dangerous runner than Taylor, and we know the Giants do like to use Jones's legs as a big part of their offensive playbook. Well, against this Jets defense, which has a lot of trouble stopping running quarterbacks, that would be an added dimension that Tyrod's going to have to use that, in my opinion, to help the Giants win this game, but he's not nearly as dangerous as Jones with his legs.
And also keep this in mind, too, Don. The Jets, they're tied for third in the NFL with 13 takeaways, but if you look at some of their takeaways this season, yes, they've come the conventional way where the quarterback makes a bad throw. For example, Josh Allen in Week 1 made 3 awful decisions, and Jordan Whitehead.
And just Mahomes, too.
Sure.
Don't just say Josh Allen.
No, okay,
Mahomes was like, early Christmas present, Jets. Here you go.
Yeah, he was throwing floaters up there.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, but the Allen one stands out the most to me because
Yes.
he was throwing deep balls down the field, and it was like, what were you thinking? So the point is there was some of that, Don, but then there was also, for example, Quincy Williams against the Eagles where they're going after Dallas Goedert to strip away the football. That has nothing to do with the quarterback's decision-making.
Right.
Or there was a play against Denver. I know this involves the quarterback, but Russell Wilson has no idea who's trailing him from the blind side, and all of a sudden he gets hit and loses the ball. So there are turnovers and takeaways that the Jets have forced, is my point. That is not just plain on the quarterback making a bad read and throwing the ball into no man's land. It involves aggressiveness out of those Jets players.
The only other point that you made that I'd like you to tweak a tad, Wilson's down for 5 interceptions this year as the Jets quarterback. 3 of them came against Dallas in one game. So on the whole, he has done a better job of reducing
especially in recent games.
Some of those turnovers. At the same time, as I explained a few minutes ago, when he is just laser focused on Garrett Wilson, especially in a pressure situation, he's going to throw errant passes. So you'll have chances, but he's been getting away with a lot of that in recent weeks.
I agree, Pete. There are chances there. He does it every game. I tend to watch a lot of Jets games too, and
I'm sorry.
He threw a little lollipop a few times during the last couple of weeks, and I'm like, wow, how did that not get picked? And the one more topic I wanted to bring up, and I'll hang up, guys, is there was another caller from yesterday that I found the topic a little bit interesting. And Lance, I know how much you love this. Here we go. Woulda, coulda, shoulda game, okay? So a caller called yesterday trying to compare our organization as far as coaching and possibly how it is another organization within our division, and the Eagles were brought up. How were they so much better? Well, here's my response, because I literally just had this conversation a couple weeks back with somebody, okay? The reason why, and I want both of your takes on this, but Lance, since you're such a fan of this game, I'm going to have to play the woulda, coulda, shoulda game. So if you, right, and as draft picks, as pertaining to the draft, here's where you cannot miss in the first and second rounds. You can't miss. Now, they don't have to be superstar players, but you can't miss. It's kind of like free throws, don't miss the free throws because they're going to come back and haunt you at the end of the game. So here's my point.
You mean like the Knicks when they missed 11 of them the other day?
No,
against the Boston Celtics?
15.
Yeah.
Not 11, 15.
Well, it was 11 at one point. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You should be thanking me for making it look better for you.
Yeah, it got to 15.
right.
Yeah. Go ahead.
A
Yeah.
game they should have won against that.
Oh, so
team.
here we go. It's the coulda, woulda, shoulda game. That's what you want to play.
No, go away.
How about
Okay, let me get back to my point.
how
I don't wanna
about
talk
how about
that.
preventing Kristaps Porzingis from dropping 30 on you
Or
in his own
Jason
backyard?
Tatum. Or
How about
Tatum.
that? Or Tatum. Yeah.
I'll
Well,
call-
Kristaps specifically, Pearson. But yes, go ahead. Yes.
Lance, I'll call your other show to talk
Yes.
basketball.
Well, that's
Let me
fine.
get
No, we
back
can
to
throw in
this.
some basketball here. We're equal opportunists. No, I understand. You were saying you can't miss in the first and second round. I was following.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's like you can't miss it. So I have to rewind a little bit for the fans because I was bored a couple weeks back. How the hell did we get in this position? Well, here we go. 2014, OBJ Richburg. 2015, Flowers Collins, on and on, 16, Apple Shep, Ingram Tomlinson, Barkley, Hernandez, Jones, Lawrence, Baker, Thomas McKinney, and you know the last couple of years. My point being, out of that time frame, since those years of their first and second round picks, there has been 1 year where they didn't miss, and it was Thomas and McKinney. So you got Lawrence, who was, the verdict's still out that people have varying opinions on Daniel Jones in 2019. Do I have to get into DeAndre Baker? Do I have to get into all the players that were missed, like Zach Martin, Aaron Donald?
No, Don, I don't mean to cut you off, but I mean, I'm understanding your point, but I don't think that's anything that's out of the blue. I think if you compare most organizations, you would say the reason why one has success and the other doesn't is they're getting great value out of the draft, but they're also developing those players too, which is the other side of the equation. Those guys are then rewarded with second contracts, which is the case with Philadelphia, and you're growing a substantive depth chart as a result of that. But, I mean, that's not something that happened, once again, within the last few years. Philly's been doing that over the last decade. I mean, Jason Kelsey was drafted over 10 years ago. Guys like Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham, I mean, we're talking about double-digit numbers when they were selected. So, I mean, that goes without saying. I mean, even the Dallas Cowboys, if you did this exercise of some of the guys they've drafted in the first round. I mean, I've been saying that for years. That's what has separated the Giants from some of these teams, and you can make that an exercise to go into the AFC territory and then some. You're going to find that's the common element. Very few teams can survive on free agency alone. The teams that have long-lasting power are the ones that draft effectively. And yes, the first and the second round is of utmost importance because of how high you're picking. And as you get into the later rounds, it's more of a roll-the-dice mentality. But here's the thing. Those teams also have made out pretty good with some of those mid to late round picks too. I mean, for example, Dak Prescott, mid-round pick for the Dallas Cowboys. And then you look at some of these safeties that the Eagles took. They also, some of them undrafted or late round picks. I mean, a Reed Blankenship, for example, and you look at what he's doing. So, that is the icing on the cake. You got to hit home runs in the first and second rounds, but then you also need to be able to get some of those base hits later on. And I think some of those organizations have stood out for that too.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate your time.
You got it. Not a problem, and appreciate the phone call. But, I mean, I would echo the sentiments of the caller, and I would say we were having those conversations, Paul, in years past. I mean, this is not a conversation that we were having just in 2022 or 2023.
And that's why it's not even fair to bring up the thought about comparing organizations. This is a year and a half under Shane Dable. I mean, come on.
Yeah, new regime. Yeah.
Let's give this regime more of a road to travel before we start talking about comparisons.
Absolutely. I think, though, he was just looking at it from a big picture perspective in terms of multiple GMs, multiple years within an organization. Here's the other thing, though, and it's interesting you went down that road. How many, and I understand with the Cowboys it's unique because the owner is /GM, but Stephen Jones, in fairness, plays a prominent role. And
Stephen Jones has bailed Jerry out on a number of occasions in the draft.
Well, my point is, though, what's the common element between Philly and Dallas versus the Giants?
O-line.
Well, no, I'm talking about how many fingers do you need for the general managers that have steered the ship. That's what I was getting at, right? I mean, Howie Roseman's been there forever. And even though he took a step back, right, when Chip Kelly took over as the head coach, they still at least had his presence. So, that's not a coincidence.
Those two organizations, though, in addition to the front office that you're talking about, they've hit on the O-line that they've acquired.
Oh, absolutely.
They haven't had misses. And unfortunately for the Giants, and we talk about this all the time, even during the last decade when the Giants have struggled so much, and primarily because the offensive lines have not lived up to their billing, it wasn't that they didn't try. They were bringing guys in left and right, using draft picks, using free agency, trades, and most of those guys did not do what they were supposed to do. The players failed.
Well, that's why you bring up an interesting point in terms of, and this is what happens with the Giants when the draft picks don't reach their true potential. Dallas and Philadelphia, even when they've had to find replacements, most of those guys, if you track them, are mid to late round picks or undrafted guys.
Yeah.
Like, for example, Dallas had briefly Lyle Collins, right, who then went on to sign for Cincinnati. And I understand Collins had some off the field baggage where his agent didn't want him to get drafted. So that was a primary reason why. But the bottom line is that was an undrafted guy they signed. That wasn't necessarily somebody who had proven himself with another team that they went out and made a splash play. And even some of these Eagles players, I mean, Jordan Mailata, we're talking about a rugby player that they found, right?
Unbelievable.
But you have those examples, is my point,
Yeah.
Paul. With the Giants, to your point, it's not the lack of going out and grabbing talent. They've tried to go down that road. The guys haven't necessarily panned out, but I think if you did a comparison, the Giants have actually went into free agency, legitimate free agency, and signed guys to try to plug up some of these holes.
I equate that situation that the Giants have had with O-linemen over the last decade to you married folks out there. How many times have you tried to take your wife out to dinner or bought her a Christmas present or a holiday present or a birthday present, and it wasn't exactly what she wanted? And it doesn't matter that you went to 5 stores to find it. It doesn't matter if you had to go through 6 dinner reservations to find a place that could fit the day and time that you were looking for. Because you know what? The missus doesn't care about all that effort you put into it. No. It doesn't matter that you busted your butt to do everything you could to get the good gift or to get the good dinner reservation. If it wasn't exactly what she wanted and it wasn't spectacular, she let you know about it.
Result-oriented business.
Every married guy out there knows exactly what I'm talking about. And that is why people should put themselves in the Giants' shoes and understand that they tried infinite numbers of times and ways to get this offensive line to where it needed to be. And you know what? Sometimes the result just doesn't turn out the way you expected it to.
Well, I've said this multiple times, and to continue to build your analogy, there's a distinct difference between avoiding something and not addressing it, or addressing it, but unfortunately not coming through. So, for example, using the married analogy, you could go 5, 6 times, you're trying, the wife doesn't appreciate it. The better half doesn't appreciate it. But it's a result-oriented business, to put a bow on this conversation, right? So I think the fans would argue it's not that they don't see the trying, it's they want results, okay? The wife wants results. She wants what she wants. She doesn't care that you sacrificed time, that you bent over backwards, Paul. She wants what she wants. Period. End of conversation.
It is good to see recently, though, guys like Wandale and Hyatt and Thibodeau, like last 2 years, these guys are getting a lot of snaps and being impactful on the field, too.
Well, and also what you're talking about is, and that's the other thing that I was bringing up with our last caller, is you got to draft well and you got to develop, okay?
Well, yeah.
You don't just draft these guys and then show them off to, your friends on paper. You got to get them on the field. So that's why it's good to see Jalen Hyatt and Wandale Robinson, to Pearson's point, they're playing them. It's interesting. I don't know. You were not doing the show, that's right, with me on, I'm losing track of the days, Monday, when I was with Madeline. Somebody called up and was asking about Paris Campbell and why we're not seeing much of him. And my response was, well, because I think they're also prioritizing getting the young guys on the field. And remember, Brian Dable even said they're shortening the rotation of wide receivers.
And it looks like those young guys have a high upside.
100%. So, but here's the thing. While you could argue, you want to see a return on a free agent signing here or there, even though they didn't sign Paris Campbell to a 5-year deal. Correct. It was a moderate deal. But I think what's more important for the well-being of the organization is getting the guys you recently drafted who are on the 4-year rookie contract, get them on the field. See what you can get out of them. So therefore, you're not playing a guessing game when you all of a sudden now have to make a decision to give them a second contract. So I have no problem playing the younger guy over the veteran, especially to your point, if the young guys are actually performing. All right, let's head back to the phone lines. Jay is in Phoenix, joining us here on BBKL. What's happening, Jay? What do you got for us?
First of all, from that last little bit that you guys were talking about, what I pulled from that, so wise, that marriage is a results-oriented business. Beautiful.
Well, you can certainly look
I've
at it.
never actually put it that way, but as long as you did, it's okay.
Well, it's just funny the way you guys are talking about gifts, and then I think Lance threw that in.
I did. No, I'm the guilty party, and I stand behind that statement, by the way. Yes.
Tell me I'm not wrong.
Oh, I agree. I've been married. I got 25 years coming up here in November.
Congratulations.
So, happily married.
Great.
It is absolutely a results-oriented business.
See?
Anyway.
There you go.
Funny thing, I love Jets and Giants, when they play this game every 4 years. And it's funny because I am that obnoxious Giants fan that Jets hate. I will inevitably, whether I'm watching any football game, whether it's college or the Giants or whatever, I'll turn to my dad, my brother, or my son, and just say, I am so grateful we are not Jet fans. No matter how bad the Giants are, I'm so grateful we're not Jet fans. And grateful to my grandpa Hank for making that choice for us. And 4 generations later, we're still rooting for them.
How old are you, sir, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 48.
Okay, well, see, here's another reason why you should be grateful not to be a Jets fan, because you would have never seen a Super Bowl championship.
Bingo. Exactly, and I've got to see 4. And that's the other thing, too. It's also nice to have that over my Patriot friends as well, that no matter what they say. I mean, I always have those 2 in 2007 and 2011. But anyway, I was calling because I was looking – I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on the roster, and I always like to kind of keep track of who we've got, where, the number of people at different positions. And I'm noticing that, well, it's obvious. We've got only 2 tight ends. We've got 5 running backs, and we've only got 3 edge rushers, I guess, Kayvon, Boogie Basham, and Jihad Ward. Is that just a product right now of the injuries, or because I just see potential problems, especially at the tight end position, because what Bellinger can do is so unique.
They've used Simmons as an edge rusher part-time. He's done a lot of spying since he came here to the Giants. They have seen fit to use him in that way. I thought he'd be much more of a blitzer, but the spying thing seems to be suiting him pretty well. So that kind of has changed his plan of attack a little bit. They do have Fox and Zimenez on the practice squad, so it's not like they're devoid. They do have Cager right now on the practice squad, and he was up until a week ago. So I don't know that, in terms of numbers, I guess what we tried to tell you during the offseason is that the Giants are a very heavy matchup team on both sides of the ball. They are really, really digging into how do we want to match up individual positions, individual players on certain Sundays. So I don't know that it's necessarily as much of a desert at those spots as you might be thinking. It's just the way that they're utilizing guys.
Yeah, because it goes back to, I think the way you look at the NFL today, maybe compared to 10 years ago, is you really have to add the 16 guys on the practice squad to the 53. Yeah. I mean, you're really working with that total.
It's really kind of 55 every week because you get the 2 elevations.
Correct. So the point is that even though you look at the 53 right now, Jay, and you say, okay, well, they seem to be short on certain positions, you have to remember, as Paul pointed out, there's a reserve. And yes, there's always the concern that somebody could sign your practice squad guys.
Yes.
Just like the Giants pulled off running backs from 2 practice squads. Okay, so there's always that risk. But something tells me O'Shane Zimenez and Tamon Fox right now are not the strongest candidates on the block, that the Giants are going to lose them. So, they have some reserves in the pass rushing department. And I think why you're seeing some of these numbers off base is it's a unique circumstance where you had numerous running backs get hurt simultaneously. You had Eric Gray go on IR. Gary Brightwell is banged up. So that's why they had to say to themselves, okay, we're going up against the Jets. It's going to be a physical, grinded-out affair. They were prioritizing needing some more volume at the running back position. But 2 weeks from now, depending on the health of Gary Brightwell, you can maybe sacrifice a running back and you can now all of a sudden bring in an additional tight end or a pass rusher. I think right now you got to look at it more of a temporary feel as opposed to something that's going to hold true moving forward.
Yeah, makes sense. And just last 2 points real quick about Tyrod and Daniel Jones. I don't feel like we need to debate right now. Let's just be grateful. Just be grateful as a fan base we've got Tyrod. I mean, to have a competent quarterback, it's been said many times by you guys, to come in and play and contribute and not be the problem is, granted there's maybe some calls in that Bills game. But anyway, I'm grateful that we have him. And then the last thing is Kayvon. Let's everybody get off his back. The guy's in his second year, and he's doing a heck of a job. I understand we don't like seeing him drop back in coverage. I can't stand it when I see it. But I kind of am starting to get what Wink is trying to do. But Kayvon is doing a really good job, and he's a heck of a player. So let's all get off his back
all right, Jay.
And just enjoy watching him develop.
And appreciate the phone call. Well, right now he's leading the team in sacks, and he's tied for the team in tackles for loss. So from a production standpoint, he's up there. But Wink has made this very clear when I think he was asked about this in the offseason, and people were emphasizing his defensive philosophy. And he says, listen, we're going to dictate. We're not going to let the offense dictate, which means we're going to try to keep these quarterbacks miserable for 4 quarters, and we're going to keep them guessing. And part of the way he keeps people guessing is he takes your conventional pass rusher, and you think he's going to go after the quarterback, and he takes him back and moves him into coverage. I understand people may be frustrated with that, but that's something that can catch a quarterback off guard because they're thinking Kayvon Thibodeau off the edge, he's coming after me, and then all of a sudden, no, he's dipping, and now all of a sudden the alley to throw the ball is not there, and that's a big part of Wink's belief. So he tells you who he is, Wink. He doesn't make this a secret, Paul.
No, not
you
at
know
all.
who he is.
He's in your face.
No. Well, I'm responding to the last caller's point where I understand people say they watch, they get frustrated, but you shouldn't be that startled because that's who his DNA tells you he's going to be from that standpoint. And then real quickly, with respect to Tyrod Taylor and Daniel Jones, here is why there's no debate. The reason why there's no debate is until Daniel Jones is cleared to practice and take contact fully, there is no debate. There's nothing to talk about because right now, Paul, there's only one quarterback that has the clearance, and that is Tyrod Taylor. When there's 2 quarterbacks that have the clearance, maybe we could have a conversation. But right now, there's no room to have a conversation because Daniel Jones has yet to be cleared for contact.
And to be honest, this is not the critical week for the Giants roster-wise because Tommy DeVito can be activated a 3rd time without causing any ripple effect on the roster. We talked about this with John the other day on this program. After this week, if you want DeVito to come up, you've got to make a roster move because he's going to have to be signed to the 53. You're not going to be able to bounce him up through the activation rule anymore. That changes things a little bit because not only do you have to bring him up and you have to use a real roster move to keep him, but it also means somebody else on the 53's got to go.
Because now all of a sudden you're going to have 3 QBs on the 53-man roster because Daniel is still on the 53-man roster. So, that's why I go back to also coincidentally the last caller's point. I was talking about there's an emphasis on running backs right now, right, Paul, because of the injuries.
Yeah.
But that could change depending on Brightwell and if they, assuming, can get Eric Gray back once he finishes the IR stint. So, that's the thing about it. Injuries and the rosters, it's always fluid, right, Paul? I mean, one week we're talking about one scenario, right, and then the following week you bring another guy back into the equation, and it completely changes things. And that's how you have to view it.
One thing you said on this show, and I know we have to run, folks, but one thing you said, and I don't think we pay enough attention to it often enough, we got to stop saying it's about the 53-man roster because the practice squad guys come into play a lot more these days, not only because they extended it a few years ago because of COVID, but they also increased the flexibility of bringing these guys up a few weeks, during the course of the season. You get 3 activations per player. It really isn't a 53-man roster anymore because those guys used to be the practice squad guys. If 1 or 2 of them came up during the season,
it would be
that was
minimal.
about it.
Sure, yeah. We were
But
never
now,
talking about it to this degree.
You're going to see 7, 8, 9 different practice squad guys during the course of the season are going to come up, and some of them are going to come up 3 times, and a couple of them at least may wind up getting signed.
Because they run out of elevation.
So it's not even your standard 53 anymore. That practice squad roster is very important.
Yeah. Well, that's why you've got to take the 53 or 55 because obviously you get the 2, and then you add all the practice squad players, and that's your roster. And that's how coaching staffs and general managers are looking at the NFL landscape now, too.
And that's why your staff is so critical, because they need to be good developers of players. Because years ago, most of your practice squad guys could just be placeholders and scout team players. And there were only a few guys who you were thinking about as real prospects. Today, you can't think of the practice squad as a lot of scout players. You have to fill the practice squad mostly with guys who you think are going to be able to play for you on Sunday, because there will be need to call them up.
You know what would be a great exercise if somebody hasn't done this already? If they track the percentage of practice
I'd
squad
love to see
players
it
every year on an annual basis.
Yeah.
To see how many are elevated.
I would
how
love
many get
to
the
see
53-man
That'd
roster.
be a fascinating stat to look at.
I'm in a position where I'm like you. I think it's a safe assumption that if we did a comparison between now and 10 years ago, I think it'd be night and day.
Ridiculous.
Night and day.
Ridiculous.
And that tells you an awful lot about how, when you view the roster, you got to go well beyond, at that point, the 53 guys that you see on paper on the team's website or whatever it may be. All right, that is going to wrap up Friday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. Today's episode, part of the Giants platforms everywhere and Giants.com/podcast, as we'll be back up and running on Monday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern, recapping Giants and the Jets.
MSG, of course, the next 3 days has the Giants Brian Dable show. Don't forget a bunch of replays previewing the Giants-Jets game. And then, of course, we'll be on the air at 11 o'clock outside the gate for the 2-hour pregame on WFAN. So there's a lot of stuff going on here this week.
All right, for Paul Dottino, I'm Lance Medow. Stay locked to Giants.com for all the latest, and we'll speak to you on Monday right here on BBKL. Have a good one.